Tech Talk. This week we're servicing our Jeep CRD Wrangler. Check it out. Well guys, today we're going to be doing a full service on the JK diesel. I typically do a minor service and a major service. So I do a minor service every 7,500 kilometres and I do a major service every 15,000 kilometres. And this is how those two differ.
My minor service always includes an engine oil and engine oil filter change. I drain the catch can and inspect the catch can filter. I clean the engine air filter, clean the manifold absolute pressure sensor. I grease all components in the steering and the suspension. I make a visual inspection of the engine, the transmission, the transfer case and the differentials. Brake and clutch visual inspection, undercarriage visual inspection, fluid checks, and also I check the wiper blades and the tyres and the wheel lugs. My major service includes all of those things on the minor service list. But in addition, I also add a tyre rotation, a full inspection of the brake discs and the brake pads, and also the brake calipers. I do a movement test on all four wheel bearings. I remove the front drive shaft and grease the double cardan joint. I do a movement test on the ball joints and I change the fuel filter.
Typically I'll change the air filter on demand, which is usually every third or fourth service. So they might go actually 30,000 kilometres without being changed. Now I find this perfectly adequate. We're solo travellers and we've got a snorkel. You know, this makes the air filters last a very, very long time. So let's start with the easiest thing, which is the oil and oil filter change. Before releasing your drain plug underneath, just undo your oil filler cap and sit it up like that. This will allow air to come in, so when your drain plug's pulled out, you'll get much more of a gush coming through, and that'll take out a lot more oil and any little contaminants that are in there. Now, a lot of people seem to struggle to do this without getting oil all over themselves. I'll show you a little trick. Position your bucket underneath. You've got to press upwards as you unwind it. That way when your plug gets to the end of its thread, you're still pushing up. And then just grab the little plug there by the side and do it like that. See how I haven't got any oil on my fingers? Now whilst that's draining, I'm going to change the oil filter, which is just here. And you can see that the air filter hose and air filter box are a bit in the way. So typically what I do is I do them at the same time. So I just unclip the air filter box. And you can see there's a lot of crud in there that I've got to get rid of. So I might take the box out altogether and just give it an empty out. That there's an air filter that's done about 15,000 kilometres. You can see it's not too bad. Once I give it a good blowout, that's fine. So to remove the air filter box is really quite simple. I've got a safari snorkel, so I just need to take that hose there off. Once I've got that out, like that, airbox just comes straight up with a good pull. Trying to get shit everywhere. Before cracking that, I'm just going to give it a bit of a clean. I don't want any dirt going in there. Now the lid of your oil filter housing has this little seal here, and you can see that it's sort of square and it's got one of its corners sticking out like that, so that's how it's got to go back on. You should get one of these seals with your oil filter. So there's the new oil filter. Let's keep that nice and clean. And here's your new seal. So what I do is I just put it in the groove like that and then just sort of stretch it a bit. You get it quite straight, and then you can straighten it up with a screwdriver if you need to. Don't stretch it too much. Just got to make sure that the profile's uniform, you don't have any twists in it. And that's it, that's how it works. Very simple. The oil filter itself has that little dowel sitting on the bottom of it, so that goes down. Now turn it round until it clicks into the hole and then push down and it should fit very snugly flat. Just make sure it's not on the piss at all as it sits there. The lid of the oil filter housing has that little spigot in there that fits down inside the middle of the filter. Before I put this on, I'm just going to put a lick of oil around that seal. Now you really don't want to cross thread this. You've got to get that spigot to lock into the filter as you screw it in. It should be quite easy to turn in. You'll feel the seal there engage on the housing. Gets a little bit harder. It's got 25 Newton meters written on the top there. You don't need a torque wrench to do this. Just snug it up, it'll be fine. Now the air filter box has 3 little dowels on the bottom that just drop into a spigot, so you got to push it down like that and it'll lock into place. One other thing I like to do, I've got it all apart, is give that mass airflow sensor there a good clean with electrical contact cleaner. Basically gets rid of any dust or any oil or dirt on it. So there's 2 sensors here, guys. I'll give them both a clean. So there's my air filter. It's had a good blowout. It's all ready to go again. And that's it. So what I do with this sump plug before I put it back in is I just flip that little copper washer over. I usually get 5 or 6 uses out of it. Now you do want to clean any oil that you've spilt off there, because you won't be able to know if you've got a leak or if it's just the residue from your oil change. You can have a look under after a few hours of running just to make sure you haven't got a leak there. So the last thing I'm going to do while I'm under here is just empty this catch can. Hopefully it doesn't go everywhere, it usually does. I usually get about 50 mils of oil for every 1,000 kilometers of driving. I empty it usually once between services and then once at the service, and that's enough. Of course, your final step here is just to put your new fresh oil in there. Just go slowly. The rated capacity for the JK diesel is 6.5 litres, I believe. I usually put about 7 in there because it tends to burn up to a litre, I guess, over my 7,500 kilometre service intervals. I also use the Penrite fully synthetic 540. The manual specifies a 530, I think. There's not a great deal of difference, and Penrite specify this for this vehicle as well. So, of course, the last thing you want to do for your oil change is to put a sticker up on your window there. The Penrite oil is really great because it comes with a sticker. Anyway, that's the oil change done. You should be checking this stuff regularly, but check your brake fluid, power steering, coolant, and your wipers. Check your wiper blades too. It's pretty hard to get those when you're out in the middle of nowhere. Next, we're going to remove the manifold absolute pressure sensor and give it a good clean. CRDs are notorious for clogging those up and the cars go into limp mode, and that's due to exhaust gas recirculation. Yeah guys, you can see how dirty that is. Got a lot of soot on it. And that's only after 7,500 Ks, or nearly 8,000 Ks. Now the reason why I take this out and clean it every service is because I was out in the Victorian high country a few years ago and the car went into limp mode, and it was because that was absolutely chock-a-block. Now I couldn't even get it out of the manifold. This is the same sensor, but it had a huge marble of crap right on the end there. And you know, I cleaned it all off, eventually got it really clean. It was very hard stuff, but I got the car going again. But ever since, I just take that out and give it a clean now, and I've avoided the problem ever since. Now I actually clean this with brake cleaner. It does a really good job and it doesn't hurt the plastic. I've been doing it for years. you don't want to touch those two elements in there at all with a screwdriver or anything like that if yours is all clogged up. Now that it's a protective cage around it, this will give it a bit of a wipe off there. As long as you can see those two probes sticking down, and even if you can see, one's actually yellow. If you can see the yellow, that's great. But I can't see the yellow. I'm not going to go any further with it. That's fine. That's as good as I usually do it. Taking off most of the crap. And I'll just let that dry and then I'll pop it back in. Whilst I'm standing up here, I like to have a really good look around and see if I can find any other problems. First thing I notice is that my belts, and I've noticed this for a while, but it's starting to look a little bit worn. The car's just done 180,000 kilometres, so at about 200,000 I'm going to replace all of the front belts and pulleys, the timing belt, timing tensioner, all that sort of stuff. So I'll be doing that back in Melbourne when we eventually arrive. You can also see that I've got oil all over the top of the engine now. I'm pretty sure that's from last time I did the service. I spilled oil bloody everywhere and just haven't had a chance to clean it off. So hopefully that's all that is. I'm pretty sure that's what it is. I do notice down here on the back of the EGR throttle valve, or the air throttle valve for the EGR system, I've got this exhaust mark. So I can see it's coming from the EGR valve itself out through a little hole there. Just a little bit worried about that. I don't exactly know why it's doing that. Keep an eye on that. Other things are looking for exhaust pipe cracks or anything like that. Also looking for loose hose clamps, any damaged pipes, damaged cables, loose bolts or anything like that. Everything looks pretty good. It's all pretty dirty, but the places we've been in the last 8 months, certainly to be expected. Last thing I do here before I close the lid is just have a little bit of a look at the fins in the radiator in the charge air cooler. Just make sure they're not filling up with mud. It was actually fully clogged in there a few weeks ago, and car started really overheating. So it wasn't so much the charge air cooler, but it was the two behind it, the air conditioner and the actual radiator. Also, I like to just make sure that the clutch on the fan feels nice and tight. That's pretty good. And I'm just going to take this little strip off and have a look down. I don't know if you can see down there, but there are still quite a few bugs and mud blocking those fins. That's about as good as I can get it though. I mean, the car's not overheating. It's all right at the moment. I am going to pull all of that out when I eventually get home and just go right through it, because it's really had a good beating over the last 7 or 8 months. Servicing isn't just about maintenance, changing fluids and that sort of thing. It's also about understanding the condition of certain items in your car. So you can keep an eye on them, and over time you'll see them deteriorate, and you have a good understanding of the rate that they deteriorate, and then you know what sort of time frame you've got to budget for a replacement. Like in the case of my front brakes, they're getting pretty close to needing replacement. I reckon I've probably got about another 10,000 kilometers in them. But every service, I just pull the wheels off, I check them, and I can see the degradation over those services. Next thing we want to do is inspect those ball joints. Now the way I usually do this is to jack up one wheel, probably an inch or so off the ground, and use a big long handled shovel. Slide it under there. It's the perfect tool for ball joint checking. The ball at the back of the shovel can be used to manipulate the tyre up and down and side to side.
Next I do a tyre rotation. The back go to the front and the front cross over and go to the back. I'm not including the spare here because I've got a damaged wheel.
While you've got your wheel off during your tyre rotation, inspect your brakes. From the back here, you can see mine are getting a bit worn. They're not too bad. You can also grease all the ball joints, your uni joints, and check your suspension bushes, your springs. Got good access to everything. Something to remember about greasing, guys, is that grease is not just there to provide lubrication. It's also there to drive out any contaminants. Any diesel fitter or a farmer or anyone who works with earth moving equipment will tell you how good at doing that it is. You can see that bad grease just getting forced out there of that ball joint. Just going to move on to the front drive shaft here now. So I'm going to grease this uni joint, the slip joint, and the double cardan joint up here at this end. The centre bearing in the double cardan shaft is impossible to grease while it's in situ. So every 6 months I take the shaft out and give it a good lube up just to make sure I can get in there and get that centre bearing. I can get the unis from the outside but not the centre bearing. This might be of interest to some people. So my manual gearbox and clutch housing, I've actually sealed up the clutch housing altogether so I can't get any water or mud in there. Now, I did that because I was going through clutches every 18 months to 2 years. And to compensate and allow some air in there and for it to breathe, I put these breathers in. I got one here and one at the top. These lines run up to the engine bay. Now, this has worked fantastically. I haven't had to change a clutch now in 4 years. I'm really happy with it. But every service I do, I just take that off and I make sure there's no oil coming out, because if there were a leaky rear seal, it would fill that with oil because it's all sealed up. You can see that there's nothing dribbling out, so that's good. This is what a CRD fuel filter looks like after about 14,000 kilometres of outback travel. Filthy. I'm just moving on to the rear now. So I've known about this problem for a while, but the shock absorber here is on the way out. It's got a little bit of a seepage happening, you can see. The top bushing is also split. Don't know if you can see that, but it's shot. And yeah, it's a bit bruised and battered. I mean, these have been excellent shock absorbers. I couldn't have asked for more than what they've given me. I'm just going to nurse this one for another little while. I don't know, keep a close eye on it. The other one's absolutely fine. The front are fine too. So another issue that I've known about for probably 6 to 8 weeks, I'd say, is I've got a leak here in the differential and a little bit up there. I think it's just from vibrations, corrugated roads, that sort of thing. I'm going to actually go into town and get some oil, and I'm going to replace the seal on that. I don't like things being in this condition if I can help it. Otherwise, everything else here's looking pretty good. Brakes are good, springs are very good, and exhaust pipes all solid. No problems. Control arms are good. Just lubed those up. And yeah, pretty happy with it. Well guys, I hope this episode of Tech Talk has been helpful for you. And let me know by leaving a comment down below if you think there is something that I could do better, or is there something that I should be adding to my service routine. I'm going to pack up all these tools now and get down the beach where I should be. We'll see you next time on the Unlimited Expedition.